Hello, Adam. Welcome to the show. I am super thrilled to have you on today.
Yeah, Moshe, glad to be here. Thank you.
So we're going to talk about a lot today, but why don't we start with talking about Daffy, your newest company. What is Daffy and who do you serve?
Daffy is a not-for-profit community that's organized around a brand new modern donor-advised fund built with really one purpose in mind, which is to help people be more generous more often. Our research shows that if people set a goal for their giving, and as you may know, 60 to 70 million households in the US give to charity every year. But if you set a goal for giving, the research suggests that you'll give about 32% more. And so for a country that's as generous as the US, where we give almost $500 billion to charity every year, adding another 32% would free up, we estimate, more than $1 trillion for not-for-profit organizations over the next decade if we all were just a little bit more generous.
Are you targeting the people that are already giving to give them a more efficient way to give, a better way to give, potentially give more? Or are you targeting the people that aren't giving to tap into that kind of philanthropy for more people?
Our primary focus is on the households in the US that already give to charity every year. At the high end, right, there are donor advised fund accounts. A donor advised fund is this special type of tax deferred account that most people have never heard of. But for millionaires and above who have financial advisors and accountants, they use them regularly as a way to manage their giving. We're trying to open up that idea of putting money aside for charity for the other 60 to 70 million households in the US who already give, but don't know that there's a tax advantage account to do so with.
Yeah. So take me for an example. I've heard of donor advised funds, DAFs. I thought that they were for millionaires. I never considered getting one for myself. Pitch me on why I should, but I do give charity. I tithe. I'm involved in a variety of organizations. Pitch me on why I should open a DAF or why I should use Daffy.
Well, I think there's a couple big reasons, and the simplest one has nothing to do with the donor advised fund at all, which is that it turns out it's good to have specialized accounts and systems for goals, financial goals that are important to you, right? Like how many of us would save for retirement if the 401k or the IRA wasn't there and money wasn't coming out of each paycheck? All Daffy does is apply that same concept of the same things that help people save for retirement or save for their kids' college savings, and applies it to giving, to charity. Now, of course, it turns out we are based on a donor advised fund, and we do believe that everyone who gives to charity regularly would be better off with a donor advised fund. And the simple reason is because the donor advised fund is a wonderful type of account. You can put money into it, you can contribute stock, you can even contribute crypto, and you get an immediate tax benefit. You get that charitable deduction when you put money aside. And then that money grows tax-free, invested in any one of a dozen portfolios that we offer. And then when you find a charity that you want to give your money to, it's just a few taps on your phone to do it. So we think it's a wonderful product and a wonderful tool for people who believe in giving and giving regularly. We have a number of people who actually use our platform for things like tithing, or for just making those donations that they make every year to their kids' school or to their alma mater, or to a church or a synagogue or a mosque or whatever religious institution they belong to. But really what we're trying to do at Daffy is just give people a great system for giving. And we think that's needed. You know, when we did some of the user research, some of the customer development before building Daffy, we discovered that people aren't very happy for a number of reasons with the way that they give today. And we think that with software and with a service, we could make that much better for those 60 to 70 million households in the US.
So do you need to engage with the charities on the other side of that exchange? Are they a part of the marketplace, or you're just working with the donors and then the charities get paid out, directly, indirectly, however it works?
Well, we're always happy to work with not-for-profit organizations in terms of improving the way that they're represented on Daffy. But our primary focus is on individuals who give to charity on a regular basis. And so we do focus on those individuals looking to put money aside for charities they already believe in, or discover great charities to give to from their friends and colleagues who also can give on Daffy.
Got it. So there's a social component, community component there as well.
That's right. You know, one of the things that people are unhappy with when it comes to giving and not-for-profits is that actually there aren't very good solutions to learn what your neighbors or your friends or your colleagues actually support, right? It's amazing. We talk about so many things, but you can find everything on social media, but you don't find very much discussion, even amongst your friends, over what causes they support or what specific organizations they believe in or have discovered. And so one of the reasons we built Daffy was to build a unique place for that content. As you may know, I'm one of the early folks who helped build out LinkedIn back when it was a small startup, through the IPO in 2011. We always believed at LinkedIn that, careers, skills, professions were an important enough topic that they deserve their own space for people to talk about them and learn about them. At Daffy, we feel the same way about giving, about charity, about philanthropy. We don't think there's a great place for people to learn and discover about how they can support different causes, different organizations today. And we think having real data, real evidence of what organizations people are supporting with their money, with their time, is a great way to seed those conversations and learn more about what you can do to give back.
Sure. And what you give to is such a personal aspect of your life, of your personality, and more than, I would say, what we consume, what we buy. What the organizations and causes that we support really say a lot about us. So making that a part of our social identity and connecting with people on that is critical. I think that's really interesting. So let's rewind a little bit. You have a really deep background across a variety of tech companies and really some of the biggest names in the Valley. And then you set out, I think it was early 2020, maybe 2019, where you posted that post on your blog. You said, I'm going to do something new. I'm stepping back from my role. I want to start something. And then you came out, 6 months, 12 months later and announced Daffy. Like, what was your thought process around what should I build as I'm going on that journey as an entrepreneur? Why start Daffy? How did you come to that decision?
Well, it's a funny story. And like a lot of founder journeys, it comes from a number of different places and different things that came together all at once. I did set out in 2020 to start a new company. And I had talked with a friend and one of my favorite engineers to work with long-term, Alejandro Crosa, who became my co-founder, about different ideas. And like a lot of founders, I had that Google Doc with startup ideas, 82 ideas on the Google Doc.
Did you have a personal CRM on there? Everybody's got that on their list.
No, sorry. After LinkedIn, that will never, ever again be on my list. That is one of those tortured use cases that everyone says they want. And then when you try to design a product for it, somehow no one's happy with it.
No one wants to pay for it.
That's a different, it's a different story. But no, so I had all these different ideas. Like I said, 82 different ideas. And to be fair, most of them were not very good. But there were a few great ones on there. But one of the lists was about great financial products that hadn't been reinvented yet. And believe it or not, the Donor Advised Fund was on there. But it was hard. The Donor Advised Fund is a niche product. It's something, as you mentioned, is something that people think is only for the wealthy if they've heard about it at all. But, I'd been on the board of Acorns for about 6 years. And Acorns is a wonderful service. It's now grown tremendously, right? They have millions and millions of people who pay Acorns a small fee every month to help them save, to make their financial lives better. And I started thinking a little bit, why can't we take all those great innovations that we've learned in fintech over the last 10 years to help people shop, to help people save, to help people invest, and turn that around to help people give, right? What if instead of a product that was designed to help, millionaires and billionaires basically put money aside for tax reasons for charity, what if we turned that into a platform where everyone could put small amounts of money aside, every week, every month? And then have available to them, every one of those 1.7 million or so charities across the United States to give to. Maybe it's because it was during the pandemic, right? And a lot of people were starting to focus on community support and all the people who were struggling in different ways to help. Maybe it's because of the background in fintech or just that I've gotten to the point in my career where I really see software as a way to help influence both society as well as kind of the things that we take seriously as people. But after talking with Alejandro, over the summer, we decided to move forward with this idea that became Daffy. We didn't have a name for it at the time, but it became Daffy, the Donor Advised Fund for You. And we set out in the fall to raise money behind the idea. And we were fortunate enough to to find a couple great venture capital firms, Ribbit Capital and XYZ, to back us. And so we set off, I think in December 2020, to build the team and build the product and launch what we think is a game-changing new service.
Yeah, and it's a great name for the product that you have. So you mentioned at the beginning that Daffy is a nonprofit, and obviously you raised venture funding. How does that work? There's a for-profit entity that Daffy is a part of, or what's that relationship?
Yeah, and that turns out to be that's a great question. It's it's a little bit of arcane details, a little bit trivia. Every financial product and service in every country has to conform to the regulations and laws about how things are structured. And it turns out donor advised funds in the US have to be a not-for-profit organization, full stop. And so Daffy is a 501c3 organization. But that brings up a paradox, right? Like, how do you raise capital to build a service like this? How do you hire the type of engineers and designers who normally work for the Facebooks and Googles and Twitters and the like? And so it turns out in the US, almost every donor advised fund at scale is partnered with a for-profit company that handles technology and operations, right? Fidelity Charitable is partnered with Fidelity Investments, and Schwab Charitable is partnered with Schwab, and Vanguard Charitable is partnered with Vanguard. And so there's almost always this partnership. The big innovation with Daffy, of course, is that instead of partnering with an investment firm, we've partnered with a venture-backed technology company called Aside Inc. And that's the company that raised money to build this amazing new platform. We're actually very excited about this conceptually because we think that a lot of the negative aspects in the existing industry, a lot of the problems that incumbents have and the reason they haven't made this available to other people has a lot to do with their business model, which is very much tied to the fact that they're partnered with investment firms.
Yeah, that question was top of mind for me just because I was, obviously OpenAI is all over the news, and they started as a nonprofit and then said one day, you know what, we're going to go for profit. And Elon Musk the other day tweeted that he's like, where did my donation go? I donated to a nonprofit and now they're a for-profit company. So what's going on there? So that's why it's kind of like top of mind for me.
Yeah, it is a topical issue. Actually, it's something that's been cooking in the industry, I would say, for a couple decades. There have been this history of partnerships between not-for-profit organizations and for-profit organizations for exactly this reason. Mozilla is very top of mind for me, going back 20 years of an open source community, and then discovered it turned out that what they built, a browser for hundreds of millions of people, actually has a lot of commercial value. And to fund their mission organization, they ended up with a for-profit subsidiary that makes hundreds of millions of years with those search partnerships. You mentioned OpenAI also, et cetera. And there's a few of these around the industry. This one, I wish I could take credit. It turns out the donor advised fund industry has already figured out this problem a long time ago. So our structure is very similar to almost every other donor advised fund out there, with the one caveat that instead of partnering with an investment firm, we've partnered with a technology firm. And we think that will provide a lot of unique benefits that you can already see in the product, where, frankly, the sector has not been known for its innovation and for the breadth of its availability, as well as for its somewhat problematic business model.
Right. So talking about business models, you're a proponent of thinking deeply about business models as a founder and thinking about what the incentives created by that model will result in product choices, other choices around pricing. Can you talk more about what you mean by that and what advice you have for founders as they are thinking about their business models early on?
Yeah, and this is one of the issues that after more than 25 years in the industry, I've become very passionate about. I've written pieces about this. I'm an angel investor in over 120 different startups. But what I tell founders is they have to be very intentional about the business model they choose, right? If a startup fails, well, then the startup fails. It doesn't really matter what business model they chose. But if it succeeds, you have to remember that at scale, when you grow your company to hundreds of people, thousands of people, tens of thousands, now we see with big tech, right? The first company I worked for, Apple, was only about 7,000 people when I was there and now has more than 100,000 employees. But at scale, you're going to hire thousands and thousands of human beings who will optimize and try to grow the business that you trust them with to grow. And that business model will guide the actions, right? Google monetizing through advertising affects the way Google's culture works. Maybe not in year one, but over 10, 20, 30 years, it comes out. Apple, of course, sells hardware devices. Microsoft, of course, sells software. So, all these different models really have impact. And, this affected us at Daffy too, right? So the existing industry and donor advised funds, their business model is to charge a percentage of assets, right? So they live at some level, even though their fundamental premise is a good one to help people give. It turns out that if you have a $100,000 account at Fidelity Charitable and you decide to give 10,000 of those dollars away to a synagogue or a church or a school, Fidelity's revenue actually does go down by 10%. So it's not that they're working against giving, but their incentives are not aligned with giving. And so when we looked at Daffy, we said, how do most not-for-profit organizations structure their business model? And what we discovered is a lot of not-for-profit organizations actually are based on membership dues, right? Whether it's a JCC or the San Francisco Zoo, it turns out that a lot of not-for-profits have memberships, and they have different tiers of membership for different services. And so we actually structured Daffy that way. So Daffy is free for accounts under $100. For a basic membership, which is $3 a month, you get access to the donor advised fund. We have a family plan at $5 a month. And then at the high end, if you want to contribute large amounts of stock or crypto, we have a high-end membership that's $20 a month. But the important thing is because we don't make money off the assets directly, we are very happy to support people in their philanthropic journey to give, right? Give away all the money. Fantastic. Keep giving it. Our mission is to help people be more generous more often, and we wanted a business model that aligned with that mission.
You're not incentivized to have people hold their money in their accounts. The money going directly to the charity is in your... it doesn't go against your business model. It doesn't go against your pricing strategy.
That's right. And more importantly, I think it's aligned around people, not dollars, right? There's a lot of ways that people give to organizations, and it's not just money. Sometimes they serve on boards or they volunteer, right? Sometimes they run events or sponsor events. There's all these different ways that people help the causes and organizations they support. The problem with focusing on dollars is very quickly you discover that a lot of the dollars out there are held by very wealthy individuals. And so you start building a business. Who can afford to have hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars set aside for charity? It's a very small number of wealthy individuals. We wanted to build a platform that was just as happy servicing someone who puts aside $10 a week for charity, right? In a very old-fashioned kind of approach to making sure they always put money aside for those less fortunate than themselves, all the way to people. We do have accounts at Daffy now. We've been open for more than a year. Our largest member accounts are over $1 million at this point. So we do have services for people who have a lot of money to give, but it's not our primary focus. Our primary focus is to build a platform that helps everyone put a little bit more money aside so that they can support the organizations that they believe in.
Going back to models and incentives, you mentioned kind of Google and advertising. And again, thinking about what's happening now with AI and how search landscape is changing. Do you think that advertising as a model is fundamentally always going to be a negative incentive, or not necessarily a negative incentive, but have negative secondary effects or tertiary effects because that is the model that most of Web 2 was built on, was advertising?
I'll argue a bit with that final point, right? When we built out LinkedIn, I think we proved definitively that you can build a large Web 2.0 social platform where its primary revenue model is not advertising, right? LinkedIn makes most of its money from subscriptions and contracts with corporations. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I doubt that will ever change. Given the scale and size of LinkedIn. So I'll quibble a little bit with the idea that Web 2.0 was only about advertising. There's a lot of Web 2.0 companies that didn't go that route. But it's not a Web 2.0 thing. Google's not a Web 2.0 company, at least in my book. It started in the 90s. And search in general, this integration of advertising or with social media, advertising has always brought up challenges. I mean, going back to broadcast television, right, and advertisers on radio and other medium, because there's a trade-off, right? Advertising is a very exciting business model or I shouldn't say exciting, but a very valuable business model, because it allows you to do something that other business models tend to not let you do, which is offer your product for free. Right. And if you want a broad-based access, if your goal was to get a technology or a service in the hands as many people across the planet as possible, it turns out it's hard to beat free for getting that value out there. But then the question comes up, well, how do you make money? And I think in its best sense, or at least in its best implementation, advertising is about relevance. It's about the idea that there are millions, if not hundreds of millions of products and services out there. And it's hard for those products and services to find customers who they were designed for. And vice versa, it's hard for consumers to find products and services that they would enjoy, that they would find valuable. And so I think advertising is one of these very powerful marketplaces that allows that to happen. I know that people have a lot of concerns, and rightfully so, about where the data is used and how the data is used and who knows what at different times. But I don't think advertising is going away. You know, it's been used for more than a century to basically solve this problem, right? Like, do you want cable TV or do you want broadcast television? Good arguments for both. And usually in the end, both business models have a place out there. One of the things I'm excited about, actually, about technology over my career is that we've over the years figured out more and more business models that can support great software teams and great products and services. And so there's actually a lot more options these days for founders in terms of picking business models, right? You know, when I started in the industry, the primary business model was still building packaged software, right? I actually had an internship, I kid you not, in high school where I actually shrink wrapped boxes of software. I actually
CD-ROMs in the mail?
Oh, no. I copied floppy disks. I printed out labels and put them on the floppy disk. I actually packaged all the materials together and actually did the shrink wrapping. It was enterprise software for manufacturing. It was my first software internship. And so I cannot tell you how tortured that business model was. I cannot tell you how many compromises had to be made around that business model in terms of the limited number of retailers that would carry your product and what you had to do to get shelf space, et cetera. It was very expensive and very limiting. And so I'm a natural optimist, both about technology and just in general. It's even in my Twitter profile. To me, what I'm excited about is that founders now have a long list of different business models they can choose from, and find the one that's best for their mission, for their community, for the product that they're building, I think is actually a much better place for the industry to be right now, and will continue to be so, I think, going forward.
So you've invested in over 100 companies as an angel investor. I'm assuming you're continuing to invest now. What type of models and what type of businesses or industries are you particularly interested in right now?
Well, so I think it varies. And by the way, I know it sounds impressive to have invested in like so many companies, but the truth is I've been an angel investor for more than a dozen years. So, average year I might invest in 4, 6, 10 companies, et cetera.
You've picked some good winners.
I have. I've been fortunate. I did a review after 10 years of angel investing, but that first batch, those first few years of angel investing, a lot of those companies have played out, right? Like in terms of, who have gone the distance. And there's a lot of excitement about Figma, of course, because of the large acquisition. Opendoor went public, and that's always been a controversial kind of company. Gusto, of course, has become a staple for most founders building startups and running payroll. So I'm very proud of those early investments. But, as an angel investor, you really see how much amazing founders do and how these companies get built. And it's very hard to take any credit at all for anything. Even if you give advice along the way, it feels like you're lucky to have seen it, to have worked with those people. But no, in the current environment, I think a lot of people are struggling from a business model standpoint. I'm a big believer that, no one has information about everything. So you have to kind of stick to your knitting about what you're an expert in, what you're not an expert in, what you know, what you don't know. So not surprisingly, most of the businesses I invest in are software businesses that focus on subscriptions, software as a service, et cetera, whether it's consumer, fintech. Although I do invest in some marketplaces still. One of the places I worked in my career was eBay. I love marketplaces. It was the Web 1.0 company where I really learned about running a great Web 1.0 company. And so I still invest in marketplaces as well, which tend to make money a different way. But like I said, there's a number of business models out there. From a sector standpoint, I'm still a big believer. I know it's very fashionable sometimes, the ups and downs in the industry. B2B is hot, B2B is not hot. Direct to consumer is hot, direct to consumer is not hot. When you invest in at the seed stage, which is what I do, you have to remember that building great companies, even in the best case, building a venture class company that gets to an IPO, that kind of scale, it's a decade at least. I think the average is 9 or 10 years. And so I try not to focus too much on what's hot right now and a little bit more about where I see real big opportunity in the long term. Big markets, good product founder fit, and a business model that I believe is based on creating real value for their customers. And so I'm always looking, these days I look at consumer. I do look at, because it's unpopular. I look at marketplaces, although those are rare to build a great marketplace, but when they come around, they really are fantastic. And I'm a big believer still in fintech. I've written pieces about where I see the industry going. I think there's a lot of opportunity. And actually, to your earlier question, I've even made the analogy between Web 1.0 and Web 2.0 about we've basically finished this first decade of what I think of as kind of fintech 1.0. And looking forward in the next decade, where will the industry go to create new value and new products and great new companies in the process?
Do you want to elaborate on that? Where do you see fintech going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, sure. I've been fairly public about it. And I apologize to everyone. You're going to hear a lot of similarity between these ideas and actually some of the principles behind Daffy. But what can I say? I actually,
practice
believe
what you
this
preach,
stuff.
Yeah,
exactly. I practice what I preach. So I really see three trends. So when I look back to Web 1.0 and Web 2.0, what changed? What was the difference between a monster.com, which was a big winner of Web 1.0, and LinkedIn.com, which was a big winner of Web 2.0? And I see some commonality with where I see fintech going. So the first thing that I see is a move from what I consider single player products, right? Something that you use by yourself, to multiplayer products. This was a big change between Web 1.0 and Web 2.0. One of the unique aspects of an online service is that you can involve more people, right? Think of Photoshop versus Figma, right? It's like one of the values of that online service is that collaboration that can be built in and scale in an amazing way that single player products can't. And so I think that, a lot of the initial products we saw online in fintech were built for a person. And I think that there's a lot of room to do. The traditional industry doesn't do a good job of dealing with more than a couple people, right? You get to a joint account and that's like, well, that's not what we can handle. You can have a single account, you can have a joint account, 3 people. Oh, can't do it. The second big trend that I see is novel products. So I talked about, a lot of Web 1.0 was just taking things offline and putting them online on the web. With Web 2.0, we saw a lot of new products that didn't really have analogs in the offline world, novel innovations, et cetera. And I think we saw a lot of that with fintech as well, is that we saw that a lot of the products that fintech built were basically taking financial products and services that were done offline, in a traditional branch or bank environment and bringing them online and doing them for people at scale. But they really were fundamentally largely the same products. And so I'm a big believer that we're going to see now is the opportunity to build novel things that haven't existed before. And then, of course, the third principle I see going forward is financial services, fintech products are based on trust. Every product that touches money is based on trust. And so it's hard when you're building new financial service technology platforms because who's going to trust a service that's only been around for a couple of years? Well, it turned out a lot of fintech was built off targeting young people, right? Young people like technology. Young people aren't, they aren't the focus of the traditional institutions. And they have a lot of faith in technology and they're willing to try new things because the dollars are smaller. And so I think a lot of fintech, including, my alma mater, Wealthfront, which I ran for 4 years, Wealthfront was very much based on going after this new kind of customer for financial advice, right? Young people who are making their way in their careers. I think the pandemic has changed everything. I think a lot of people know this, but one of the ways that it's changed things is that it's sped up comfort and adoption with technology, right? My parents, doctors, et cetera, have brought their, money to the bank, checks, et cetera, for most of their careers, right? By hand, once a week, they go to First Republic and deposit their checks. in the pandemic, that was not available and not the right thing to do. And so they all learned how to do electronic check deposit. They instrumented things up. And so I think now what I'm looking for in fintech is not products just isolated for young people, but actually recognize that there's a lot of markets out there. And if you combine these ideas, I'm very excited about the opportunity to build multi-generational products, right? So one of my portfolio companies has a product where, if you have aging parents, et cetera, you're a little worried about what they might be doing financially. You can link their account and get alerts if something unusual happens, right? Why is grandma sending a $500 Venmo? Good to know, right? These are the time. Why is grandma moving money around or that sort of thing? And that's just one idea for a feature, but I think there's a lot of interesting products and services to be built that cross generations and different times of life. So anyway, those are the three big trends I look for. And obviously at Daffy, we've leaned into those things, right? One of the big features we launched last year was our family plan, which sounds so obvious. Every tech product has it. And yet no other donor advised fund that we can find has done it. And we think that giving is very much a family thing in a lot of families, and not just a nuclear family, right? Complex families, different relationships, multi-generational. And so I'm very excited about what fintech is going to be able to do in the next 5 to 10 years.
Fascinating. Let's shift gears for a bit and talk about growth, and specifically some of the growth lessons that you've learned along your illustrious career. Can you rewind to some specific kind of case studies around growth, let's say with Dropbox, Wealthfront, Acorns maybe? What have you learned around growing these platforms to significant scale, right? So you came in, they were already kind of post-product market fit, somewhat established players, and then you were instrumental in really growing those businesses to be dominant players in their verticals. Any lessons around growth that you want to share with us?
Yeah, there's a few lessons, and I've actually blogged a lot about this. Growth as a focus, it's been kind of funny for the industry because obviously there have been people working for decades in marketing that saw their primary value on kind of user acquisition, customer acquisition, right? This is not a novel field or a novel concept. But what happened, I think, with actually the Web 1.0 to Web 2.0 transition is that one of the things that we learned as an industry was not only that growth doesn't just magically happen. There's some danger in this product market fit discussion. People will talk about product market fit as like you flip the switch and then all of a sudden you have so much demand you can't even deal with the customers, and as if it just magically happens. I'm not going to say that there aren't periods of time where that hasn't happened to a few companies out there, but that is not the common case in my opinion, and not something any founder should count on. Usually the way growth happens is concerted effort of people to understand their business, understand how they're acquiring customers, how customers are finding them, how to convert those customers and keep them happy. I know it sounds obvious, but it turns out, that was relatively new. So, obviously, at LinkedIn, I ran core product. We started the first growth team at LinkedIn in my area. Everyone knows about Chamath at Facebook, of course. But this idea of focusing growth, what changed was increasingly techniques for growth, whether they were viral growth or other mechanisms, were based on product functionality, which meant engineering, building features, which was harder for marketing to do directly, but was easier for a product management and organization that was in the technology team to kind of orchestrate and do. And so growth moved largely from marketing to product, in terms of organizational structure and kind of process. In terms of lessons for people on growth, besides the obvious that you have to work it, there's some basics. The first thing, of course, is to understand that it's easy to talk about things like viral growth, et cetera, but it's much harder to generate it. Whatever channels that you are acquiring customers through, you have to think through who is your target customer, where do they aggregate? I always recommend for startups and founders to think carefully about their non-users. I know it's counterintuitive, but engineers and designers love to talk about their users. They have data about their users. They get feedback from their users. They go out and talk to their users. You get this oversupply of information about your users, and that's all valuable, but it can lead to a blind spot to the fact that most people have never heard of your product. They don't know what you do, and you're not listening to them. This is, by the way, why market research was always something you wanted to invest in at scale. But, understanding, where are those customers, talking to people who don't use your product, identifying adjacencies to your existing customer base, where modifications to your product could reach new markets. These are all basic aspects of building out new products and services. But you have to think about it. The second thing I always recommend to founders is really be careful about this distinction of how you run before product market fit or after. And this is what you alluded to. Before product market fit, there's a lot of judgment in what you're doing. You don't have sufficient data. And the data that you have, some of it is valid and some of it's invalid because you're getting data from customers that may not be the right customer segment for you, right? They might not be what your product should do at scale. And so before product market fit, there's a lot of techniques for kind of finding that product, finding that right combination of distribution channel, conversion, and customer delight that actually produces a great and compounding pattern of growth. Once you hit product market fit, however, you have to change your posture. You're getting real data from the market. And even the best founders, even the best designers, whoever you think is so inspired to come up with things, you're lucky if you got it half right in terms of what your intentions were for the product and service and where people are actually getting value for it, how they're discovering whether referral. So, before product market fit, you're doing a lot of one-off understanding. You're talking to people, you're doing research, you have hypotheses, you're testing them out. After product market fit, you have to go and look at the data. You have to actually see, how do people talk about this product? Where are they finding it? What are the stumbling blocks they're running into and making the decision to use your product and service? When people leave your service, why are they leaving your service? You actually have this gift. You have real data. But it's usually very hard for startups that have run for a number of years based on judgment and intuition to flip into a posture where they actually have humility in the face of what their customers are telling them, not just in customer service, not just in user research, but with the actual clicks, with the actual data of what they're doing. And so actually a lot of what I've had to do when I go to companies or I work with founders before product market fit, I usually have to get them comfortable making decisions without data. And then after product market fit, I usually have to talk to founders and companies a lot about how to use data to make those decisions more objectively and lean into the market that's happening, not the fictional market that they had imagined when they started the company.
Right. All very good points. And they tie back very well to various conversations that we've had on this podcast with founders around, product market fit, this fictional moment of like, suddenly you have it. Most companies don't reach that. The importance of talking to non-users, because if you're looking to grow, you need to know from the non-users what they want, and not necessarily from your users. If you're looking to grow, a lifetime value and land and expand, then sure, talk to your users, but your growth needs to come from non-users. And, really good point around looking at the data post product market fit, because that's when you start having those quantitative signals. When you're thinking about integrating the information that you're getting, qualitative customer interviews, market research, and then quantitative data, usage data, in-app data, things like that. How do you take it all in? How do you integrate it to make decisions? Sometimes always with imperfect data, but sometimes you have too much data and you don't really know what to make of it and to act on it.
Yeah, it's a tricky problem. So a lot of people in the industry have come to use scientific method or scientific metaphors for how you figure out how to build a product or a startup or hit product market fit or grow your business. And I think the fundamental thing behind that is it's this idea of hypothesis testing. And I really like that frame, right? So I think that every startup is just a hypothesis. You have a hypothesis that there's a novel, valuable company to be built in this area, right? It's not just about the product, it's about the company itself. And that breaks into a whole set of problems, and you have hypotheses on how to solve them. Maybe they're informed by past experience, or maybe you're just testing things out. And so I like that framework of having a hypothesis and then testing it. The problem is that gets overutilized, in my opinion, to map specifically to things like A/B testing or statistical significance, et cetera. And unfortunately, there are just too many problems to solve where you can't get perfect data, where you can't get statistical significance. You don't have the volume to run flavors. At scale, you can do this, right? Like when I work for companies, eBay, LinkedIn, et cetera, like there's no problem with scale. You run out a 1% test and within hours, you kind of know if it was net positive or negative, at least in the short term. But making long-term strategic judgments don't work that way. Avoiding the local maximum problem doesn't work that way. And so in general, what I like to do is just be thoughtful about this idea that anytime you have a hypothesis, it usually comes from an insight from one data source. Maybe it comes from a customer service inquiry. Maybe it comes from user research. Maybe it comes from metrics. Maybe it's strategic thinking, right? There's all these different ways that people try to absorb information and come up with a theory on how to solve the problem. For me, what you're looking for is for a different data source to confirm the hypothesis before you lean into it. Right. So if someone in metrics, a data analyst, data scientist comes and says, hey, actually, it looks like, right, our Android customers actually are shopping less than our iOS customers. What you're looking for is, okay, that's an interesting hypothesis. But before I launch into solving that problem, can I get confirmation that that problem exists? Is there another data source that actually confirms that? If it was a quantitative source, is there a qualitative source? Right. And maybe your strategy team, or maybe someone who has insight in the industry says, oh, actually, a lot of other e-commerce companies see that same pattern. Right. That's a form of confirmation. So now you have a real issue. Right. Like, how are you going to work that issue and solve it? That's the next step. But the biggest, I think, and hardest problem is figure out which problems to focus your time on. Right. Startups are filled with hundreds, if not thousands of problems. You can't do them all at once. And so I like this idea of having lots of different sources for insight. Using those insights to form hypotheses about what you can do to make your product better, make your business better. And then looking to another source to validate that problem before you dive in to solve it. And by the way, like I said, you see this in both sides, right? Some great insights can come from user research or customer development. Sometimes your sales team are the ones who bring back amazing customer insights. Sometimes it is metrics based. But if it was a qualitative source, look for a quantitative validator. If it's a quantitative source, look for a qualitative validator. And my experience has been when you have both of those validations, it's not just a checkpoint to make sure you're prioritizing the right things, but actually having two sources of insight makes it much more likely that the team will have the insight to actually solve the problem correctly, right? The metrics can show you what's happening, but the metrics rarely tell you why, right? And qualitative can give you a lot of answers for why. And unfortunately, some of them are correct and some of them are not. And it's hard from the qualitative sources to figure out which is which. How much are rationales, right? How much information are you getting from effectively an unreliable witness? People aren't very good at explaining why they do the things that they do. And so very often going to metrics can help you separate what people say they do from what they actually do. But that's usually the advice I give in terms of whether it's growth or actually even product design itself, is always look for insight from more than one source before diving into a problem.
Quantitative can tell you what, and the qualitative will tell you why often.
Yeah. And like I said, there's always a little room for judgment in here. Like I said, none of these data sources are perfect, right? You can have metrics attribution that's off, happens all the time. You have correlation, not causality in many, many cases. And vice versa on qualitative, you get a lot of data from that, but is it representative of the broad population or just an anecdotal experience, right? Is this the real reason that people are doing things, or is this the reason that people say they're doing things? There are incredible branches of expertise in all these different areas. And I know that smart people work on these problems, but my experience has been that software is really a team sport, and it's best to think of it that way. Every one of those data sources has experts who are great at looking at information. Still, I always look for a validation. I look for a second, right? If data science thinks that there's a real problem here to be solved or a real opportunity, love it. I want to hear about that, but I'll look around for another source to validate it before going deeper.
Going back to the example of Dropbox, everybody uses the case study of Dropbox for their referral program as being the main driver for success early on. I don't know how much it contributed percentage-wise. Obviously, it was a successful program. I'm sure it's not the only thing that you guys did successfully. how do you think about, why do you think that Dropbox was so successful specifically with their referral program? Obviously, they weren't the first ones to do it. And any tactical learnings from there that can be applied today for any startup that's looking to do something similar?
Yeah, Dropbox wasn't the first company to implement a great referral program, et cetera. I mean, you can go back to the 90s. I mean, PayPal originally grew off referrals, et cetera. But I do think there are regular patterns. And at Wealthfront, for example, we built our referral program based on the Dropbox pattern. And I often talked about that. Dropbox did it with storage, of course, and Wealthfront did it with money, but it was still the bones of the program were the same. But I do think there's a lot to learn from Dropbox in terms of what worked for them. And it's really three things. The first thing is they found a mechanism, an incentive that actually fit what users wanted. And what was actually best about it, it was a functional incentive and not a monetary incentive, right? There's a lot of behavioral research that people behave differently around money than things that are once removed from money. But it turned out when you had this magic folder in the cloud that could store anything you want and you could get to it, you were limited by how much you could put in it. And so the idea of getting more storage was appealing because people would run into that limit. And fundamentally, that limit meant that they would have to pay money for the service. And so they could get to money, but it wasn't all about money. It was what they were actually trying to do with the product. The second thing that's great about Dropbox, of course, is actually it naturally does have some virality, right? This wasn't just imposed. The product really does get better the more people who use it, right? If I'm sharing a file or folder with someone, that's useful. That's a new thing that I could do that I couldn't do as easily before. And that's inherently a viral action, right? I need another human, and that other human makes the product better. It solves a problem for me. And virality always works better when it fundamentally has a selfish motivation as well from a product perspective, right? When I invite you to connect on LinkedIn, it's not just because I think you'll be better off if you're on LinkedIn. It's also because I'll be better off if you're on LinkedIn and I can see your connections and see your activity, et cetera. And so viral systems really work best over products where the product gets better itself for the user, the more people who are on the product. And then, of course, I think what Dropbox did, the third thing, which never gets talked about, but actually is amazing, is that they really optimized that flow. They really spent time making sure that that flow converted well and was aligned with their long-term monetization, right? You know, Dropbox had a business model that turned out to be very simple. It actually worked from the get-go, which is that, you know, it's free up to a certain point, and then if you want more storage, you have to pay for it. And it turns out that by sharing files and folders, you end up with a use case that makes you put more stuff on it. And so it actually, the entire viral action ended up feeding the business model as well, because the more people that you share files and folders with, the more storage you're actually going to need from Dropbox. And so that even though you get this incentive, it's kind of like, you know, video games a little bit. You know, in the beginning, they give you the gems for free. You like it. You can save some time. And then it turns out that eventually you get used to it and you want to pay for them. Most video games, mobile games, you'll notice have a currency that you earn as well as a currency that you purchase. And it's not surprisingly that a lot of great viral systems for growth have similar aspects to them. And in fact, I do recommend to a lot of founders to think more deeply about game mechanics and the way that video games handle these problems, because they're not viral always in the traditional sense, right? You can learn a lot about why video games spread and what mechanisms they use. But anyway, those are the three things for Dropbox. You know, LinkedIn was actually very difficult to grow. One of the reasons we formed the Grwth team is I think there's a mistaken assumption that LinkedIn would just automatically grow, right? Oh, give people a platform and invite other people and just like that, it'll work. But no, we worked every step of that flow. We worked every use case. We optimized onboarding based on what traffic source you came from. The organic onboarding was different than the SEO onboarding, which was different than the viral onboarding. And we tried to make sure that every time someone came into LinkedIn, we made it clear to them that LinkedIn is better for them if the people that they know and trust are on it. And we tried to make it very, very easy for them to invite those people. And actually, some of those product improvements were very counterintuitive, I remember. But it's not something that automatically happens. And it's a place where very small differences numerically in conversion rates and flows can make all the difference between a viral flow that replicates and adds compounding growth to the business and ones where you do it You get a few users, but it's not material to the growth of the business.
Adam, I can keep going here, but I want to be respectful of your time. So we're going to transition to the exciting lightning round. I'll ask you some questions. Tell me, in under 60 seconds, first thing that comes to your mind. How does that sound?
It sounds good.
All right. What book, podcast, or newsletter do you find yourself recommending most often?
Oh, that's interesting. The Substack that I read most often these days for kind of macro coverage, et cetera, is from Noah Smith, No Opinion. He does a great combination of insight into tech. He has a kind of unique background in both physics and economics, and is willing to put a lot of ideas out there. What I'm always impressed with him is just the volume that he puts out and the quality of the data and research he tries to include in those. So I do recommend that Substack. In terms of books, of course, I tend to get a lot of questions. I teach a class at Stanford on personal finance. I have a book list that I recommend for people, but it's mostly focused on the basics of understanding how money works, et cetera. And I'm happy to provide that list of books to anyone. It's available online, et cetera.
That would be great. And actually, I was hoping to get to that topic around finance for founders. Obviously, we've so many interesting things to talk about, so I had to kind of whittle it down, but maybe we'll get you back for a future episode to talk specifically about that. I know that's a topic that you're passionate about. So we'll put those links in the notes. What's the proudest moment of your career?
Oh, that is a great question. I'm hoping that it's going to be the founding of Daffy. Of course. That's, but no, I mean, I've been very fortunate. I don't know if I can pick a specific moment. The truth is I'm fairly proud of being a small part in almost every company that I've helped out. And I think it's because I really do think about the industry. I think about what we're doing in terms of people more than technology. And I'm so proud when I see teams of people with different backgrounds, different skill sets come together and use something novel like technology to solve a problem that really is meaningful to people. I mean, I joined eBay because I really thought it was magical that people could connect from all across the world and effectively take things that were going to be wasted sitting in people's desk drawers and and actually finding them a home where they could create value and they were valuable to other people. Or the fact that, someone in the Midwest on eBay could make a few $100s extra per month, and that would make a material difference in their lives. That was just very motivating. LinkedIn, people's reputations and relationships. The world is not kind these days. There's no job where you can hold work at a company for 40 years and get the gold watch, right? Like people are moving around, giving people the tools to own their careers. So Wealthfront, the idea that financial advice should be available to everyone and not just people who have $1 million or more. I could go on with the list, but for me, I guess the common source here is I'm proud to have gone into this industry when I did. I'm proud to be a part of groups of people who are trying to use new technology to solve real problems for people. Sign
of great technology companies is that we take them for granted, but at the time they were completely not obvious. Right.
Oh, always. It's so repeatable. Every new product looks like a toy. Every new technology looks like, why do I need that? This is good enough. And then somehow 5, 10, 20 years later, people can't imagine it any other way. I cannot tell you how counterintuitive LinkedIn was to people. Why would I post my resume online if I'm not looking for a job? Right? Like this Wealthfront. So you're telling me I can send my money to people I've never met, to a company that didn't exist before, and that a computer is going to be managing my money? Very hard sell. Very hard sell. And yet now, I mean, what institution doesn't have an automated service?
What's on the flip side, what's one thing that you'd like to change about the startup world?
I'm going to betray my gray hair here for a second. I actually always worry when things get too hot. When people think the money's too easy, when you start seeing people coming in, because there's always a danger, not just in technology, but in business in general. There's lots of ways to make money. When I think the industry is at its best when it makes products and services that create value for their customers, and the company or business takes a small portion of that value that they've created to kind of fund the creation of the business and reward the people who are involved. And so that idea that the amount of value you create should always be much, much bigger than the value you take. It's just kind of a core principle of how I think about software companies, et cetera. When I invest in companies, that has to be true. Otherwise, I won't invest. But when things are hot and money's flowing around, people start focusing on just the making of the money and not the value that they're creating. And I always worry about that. And so actually, I know it sounds funny given all the strains and struggles of recent weeks and months and, the last, 12 to 24 months. But actually, I think it's very healthy for the industry. One of the reasons, believe it or not, I went to business school when I did was that the Valley was getting too hot in the late 90s. It felt like companies were starting with the S1, almost like Mad Libs, and just filling it in just to go public, instead of building large sustainable businesses that could really be foundations for innovation long term. And it's one of the reasons I opted out. I thought there had to be more to business than what I was learning in Silicon Valley in the 90s. And I was happy to find out that it was true. And actually the market did correct, and it led to Web 2.0 and a lot of other great innovations. And so I'm hoping this downturn will also lead to that same refocus on creating value and capabilities. But yeah, that's the thing about the industry I'm always most nervous about.
I like that cautious optimism. I'm with you on it. Adam, I've enjoyed this so much. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. How can people find you, and any final words or advice that you have for founders or startup growth practitioners? My blog, adamnash.blog. I'm on Twitter, etc. It turns out I've been around long enough that I'm Adam Nash on most services. So just feel free to check out if you're interested in product management or growth. I have a lot of writings there. At the top of my Twitter feed, I have a video of one of the speeches that I've given about product excellence and growth, and I think you'll find it valuable. But the second thing I'll just say to everyone is please check out Daffy. We're new. We think that we have an excellent product. We think that this product actually will help you and people in your life be more generous, right? Whether it's just you alone or your entire family. And so go to daffy.org, put some money aside for charity, give it. It's amazing to have an app where anytime it strikes you, you learn about a new organization, et cetera, that just a few taps on your phone, you can give money. And from a tax perspective, if you're fortunate enough to have stock or crypto, the ability to contribute that to a fund, get that tax deduction, never pay capital gains taxes on those gains, and then, of course, have that money available for the organizations you support, we think is an amazing combination. But even if you don't like it, I want to hear from you. So please go try the product and let us know what you think. I'll definitely do that. And I encourage everybody to follow Adam on Twitter, not just for his product wisdom, but also for his amazing orchard and garden. I'm just very jealous of it, and I love seeing those pictures. So keep posting those, please. Thank you, Adam. Wishing you all the best with Daffy and with everything else and your beautiful family. Wishing you lots of success, and thanks again for joining. Yeah, thank you, Moshe. It was wonderful to be here. Happy to do it again.